Konbanwa. Irashaimase. Welcome to my totally not a podcast, Paprika Girls Midnight Diner. When I'm recording this, it is the 8th of September, which puts us in the season of Hakuro, the white mist, and the micro season of Soro Shiroshi, meaning the grass whitens with the dew. There's another reading for this micro season, Kusa no Tsuyu Shiroshi. But when I first heard the title Soro Shiroshi, it reminded me of that ubiquitous gobi, or suffix, at the end of the Edo period samurai speech. Sessha samurai ni ite, sorai domo, soro ni te sora wa ba, aitsu to memoshiage shi, nochi soro to shite, jikyou itashi ori soro. Something like that. If you've ever seen samurai flicks, it's just sort of like a degozaimasu, the old-timey version of desu. Anyway, that repetition of soro had already been pushing buttons in my brain, so Soro Shiroshi stuck in my head better than Kusa no Tsuyu Shiroshi. And there we have it. Plenty of useless information. Now I'm sitting on my engawa outside tonight, enjoying the balmy evening of early autumn. Just a week ago it was too hot to sit outside like this without breaking a sweat, and a week before that it was raining, so one must enjoy the weather while it lasts. I have a little ditty on my phone right now, but it is short, and I think I shall not play another one. This is on account of someone mentioning that I don't need it. But what will fill the silence as I drift more deeply into my world of inebriation? So, tell me if I need it or not. It's up to you. I have here in front of me a mini bottle of sake. It is, in fact, called Kissho Kichijitsu by Yukino Bosha Shuzo in Akita. The name is a play on the well-known tea phrase Nichi Nichi Kore Kojitsu, translated as every day is a good day, by our very own translating master on X, Lady Eleanor Goldsmith, and a direct nod to my little village of Kichijoji. I live about 15 minutes walk from the station, and I really do love this town. Next weekend, on the 15th, is the local Kichijoji Autumn Festival. It's not very well known, and though I'm always bringing my friends, I rather hope it would stay small. There are a number of omikoshi in my little town, and little stations or tents set up all about for the carriers to rest and be refreshed. It is my self-appointed duty to join the ladies, passing out candy and beer for the young omikoshi heavers, and while waiting for the next one to arrive, we drink lots of sake and beer and enjoy the meal. I have been participating at my station for the last 15 years, and every year it's a joy. So, kanpai to Kichijoji and the Autumn Festival. More highlights next time, when I shall regale the tales of the seasonal fest. I should think. Now, the real reason I decided to jump into tonight's improv is on behalf of Kurt, a most honored friend on X. Just yesterday, he recorded what I think is his very first podcast, vlogcast. It was a video on YouTube. Kurt, please do post it on X too. I must say, it was absolutely chock full of charm. Sujikanai ni charming, to pull from today's chat with Highlands Hachiroku and Tomoe. I was brought to smiles immediately with the setting up of the camera, first of all. He did not edit that bit out. In fact, it seemed to be a live stream, because he commented on things on which other viewers were commenting in real time. I do not know how to do that. I think my time zone would be off even if I did, so I won't try it. But here's the thing. Kurt's genuine, tipsy recording is precisely what I enjoy about this circle of gaijin Twitter podcasters. You see, back when I came to Japan 20 years ago, YouTube was just taking off, and everyone had their own little vlogs, mostly unproduced personalities talking into the camera. And then it became monetized, and suddenly a wad of them went full-on professional, getting all this gear and fancy editing tricks and algorithm-friendly top 10 reactions and unpackaging and gobbledygook. YouTube is no longer the friendly bunch of drinking buddies it used to be at that time. But here, in this little limited community of gaijin Twitter on X, we have a return to the real when it comes to the podcasting few. Even with jingles and intros and all that, it is only minimally produced, and our audience is similarly minimal. What it brings, however, is freedom from commercialism. We are not selling anything. We are not shilling for anyone. Except Monster Cookies, everyone. Go buy his cookies. And the occasional good drink, maybe. Now, there's something to be said about the expat community, especially as we age. I have lived in many, many countries. I once had a lovely discussion with Kevin from Just Japan podcast, in which we discussed this very thing. I have lived in America and Europe mostly, and a bit in the Middle East. Every country in which I have sojourned has had its own expat community. Naturally, since I am an English speaker, I am only acutely aware of the Anglosphere thereof, but I can assure you it is pretty much the same anywhere one goes. The only difference I can sense is that there is a sort of sword-measuring contest permeating the relationship between those who speak the local language in Japan and those who do not, in a way that I have not seen elsewhere. I prefer to shy away from that group. But let me tell you this. Loneliness is a most common theme for expats. One might even venture to say, when exacerbated by linguistic and cultural alienation, it touches on the fringes of diaspora. But anyone who has lived more than a decade can tell you that it's not an expat issue. It's a human issue. Now, Kurt suggested I bear a little bit more of my soul here, so here it is. As I was growing up, I moved countries so often that I never had an opportunity to make any real friends. Even now, I do not remember the names of hardly anyone I met before I was 14, even if I do remember faces and incidents. As a result, I had learned from the moment I was old enough to open a book how to amuse myself. I read, drew, wrote, and read some more. No matter where I was, whether I was in a party or not, very few things could pull me away from my notebooks, except perhaps the occasional cat or animal of some sort, which are always far more amusing than humans and only slightly more amusing than books. This is not to say I was never lonely, but simply that I never developed the need for external validation. If I was so blessed as to have some attention, it was icing on a cake. But even without it, the cake was still there, and it was castella. What reading and the subsequent consummation of films taught me was how many kinds of people there are in the world. There's so many experiences and perspectives, dreams and philosophies. And yet, through all of them, there was, in fact, one constant theme: loneliness. Every character study I have ever read, every novel, and a good deal of biographies all carry that same underlying theme. We, as creatures, are a lonely creation. Youths tend to fill the silence with friends and phone calls and parties and sports. As we grow older, in our 30s, the circles dwindle down as we choose those with mutual interests and paths. Eventually, hopefully, choosing one of those encounters to become one's spouse. From then on, we whittle down our phone books to limit ourselves to time spent with those we love most, which tends to be family. As we grow older, and the rustling, noisy leaves of interpersonal relationships slowly subside, we may feel pangs of nostalgia, thinking back on better days, or loving memories, or perhaps even pining on lost opportunities. In these moments, one can find himself especially lonely. In addition to our loneliness, mankind tends to be full of regret. See, if loneliness and regret fills all one's thoughts, it can push him right through to depression. This is staved, of course, in all kinds of ways, by filling the day with noise and activity, by raising endorphins through exercise, or simply by focusing on the meaning in one's life, often a spouse or children, perhaps even pets. But we are, admittedly, all a lonely bunch. This is why the amateur, casual, improv podcaster is so important. One does not need a large audience to feel a presence, even if your regular listener is only one person. That makes at least one person someone who has the opportunity to empathize, muse on your state, say a little prayer on your behalf if he feels so inclined, and maybe even respond. This is something that was lost as YouTube became too big for its britches, but I am ever so happy to find it here on Gaijin Twitter. I must say, there is a face I rather miss from Gaijin Twitter. Until the beginning of the summer, Gaijin Oto-san was a staple character in our group. A sensitive city boy who'd moved into the hills of Shizuoka and was trying to find the beauty of it. He was generally quite positive of presence, but eventually the isolation took its toll on him, and he ended up moving back to the United States. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if he had found his circle. Even online, although he was positive it was a little too much so, he was bearing just enough of himself to be vulnerable. They call that tsuki o dasu in Japanese. I know he's safe back in New York where he belongs, but I do think of him from time to time. We have lost our social media friends along the years, but it is the same in real life. I can count on one hand the number of people I've known consistently over my 20 years in Japan. For all those who have left, I've found new, charming faces and voices, which mean just as much to me. But now and then I do in fact wonder how they are and what might have been. But I shall not spend any time in lamentation. What was meant to be has already been, and as I refer to often in the book of Ecclesiastes, hevel, hevel. I wonder what hevel hevel is in Japanese. Muda? Munashi? I have gone into philosophical depths of wine which only Veritas can dwell. Let us bring up the topic to a more appropriately floaty level. I must inform you of something Japanesey, because that is really what this non-podcast is about. This is not a podcast, because it is not properly refined, has no real message, no platform other than X right here, and is far too inconsistent to be meaningful. But it is good fun, and only that. Let's see. How about seasonal words of September? As I sit here with my trusty ochoko of sake, I gaze up through the thatched sudare in search of the moon. There is but a thumbnail of one, called a mikatsuki. So, kangetsu, tsuki no en, tsukimi zake, tsuki no yado, tsukimi chaya, tsukimi bune, and my favorite, tsukimatsuru. If you do not know what those words quite mean, you can see the subtitles I have set up on the video. All of the words are beautiful Yamato kotoba. Yamato kotoba are terms and phrases which are indigenous to the Japanese language. They have their own rhythm. Like English has iambic pentameter, there is a way of pronunciation and writing that sounds natural to a native. If you are a Japanese learner struggling with keigo, let me instead turn your attention to the mastery of Yamato kotoba, and the rest will come quite naturally. But back to tsuki repetition. This is the month of Otsukimi. I mentioned this on an ex-post, but generally while parties in which one attempts to catch a reflection of the moon in their ochoko were the origin, now anything with an egg in it counts as Otsukimi celebration. And I see nothing wrong with that. The tradition continues into the modern day. Burger shops are now featuring tsukimi burgers everywhere. Shakes with bits of yellow fruit, all of that counts. As long as you look up on the full moon and appreciate the autumn evenings. You see, that is really all we have in life. For all our muddling about, country hopping, even just bumbling around in our own little villages and communities, life is simply a collection of tiny moments. Noticing the moon, listening to the evening insects, the sound of the pigeon on the branch while one writes their text messages. Sokkon, sokkon. Do not let these moments go by unappreciated. I see from here that my Goya plant is beginning to turn yellow. Perhaps tomorrow I will cut it down. The leaves smell so fresh, so scrumptious. It is such a summer staple and has provided us with much bitter sustenance this season. I shall use this year's seeds to plant next year's crop. Time to close, bittersweet gourd of the bump. Finally, in an attempt to further exemplify the human side of life here in Japan, I shall bear in public a number of gripes within my own home, which are on my mind and in my line of sight. First of all, husband has brought home a fox mask. He received it at a summer festival of some sort, and it is now hanging in my vestibule above the fish tank. It is admittedly a very nice mask, since it was at a fancy pants party of sorts, and the kinenhin gifts they gave to visitors were of good quality. But it is still hanging in the vestibule on a random nail and looks very out of place. I do not know what I'm going to do with it. At the very least, it is no longer seasonal. I need to find a respectable way to display it. Well, let's see. Number 2, the fish tanks. We have a good number of small fish tanks about the house. 2 pots in the garden with medaka, a large river display of freshwater fish which is going under renovation this weekend in the vestibule, a simple and heartwarming setup at the end of the long hall in front of the engawa, And then the goldfish. Poco is a big goldfish I got from a film set some months ago. First, he was in a little tank, but husband didn't like that. Then we got him a bigger tank and redesigned his layout to look even classier. Then we got another goldfish to keep him company. All was well until a few days ago, when suddenly we noticed that the new goldfish was nipping at Poco's tail, and the fins were now shredded. We promptly moved the new goldfish to another temporary tank and named him Sushi, because he was really on the chopping block now. Fortunately, goldfish fins heal very quickly. He should be back to normal in a couple weeks. But what to do with Sushi? Yet another tank? It is not so much the tanks that bother me, but the filters. Wires and plugs and tubes and all that bother me so, and need constant dusting in awkward places. What's worse, we discovered that goldfish don't get lonely, so we did not need to buy another one in the first place. But now that he's here, he's part of the family, so we can't very well get rid of him. Sushi. But that is all on my husband. But really, it's bothering me more than him. And oh yes, my plastic cat cup has broken. This is of significant concern to me, since not any old cup will do. You see, I have a water server in the kitchen. Having a cup on hand there encouraged me to drink more water. When the cup broke, however, I thought I could just use a proper glass. But then I realized that I could not keep such a thing on the water server, lest it would get knocked off. I should just buy another cup. But you see, that too is trouble, because that particular cup was perfect. My house is somewhat akin to the look of a hotel. Everything matches perfectly and is always in guest-ready condition. To have a badly placed cup makes it look like cheap bric-a-brac, and I cannot handle that. So, until I find the perfect cup, my world is shaken. I know what you are thinking. In the words of the avocado toast generation, first world problems. And to this, my answer is yes, you are right. These problems are so benign and stupid that there is no reason to air them out on social media. So, I do not usually mention such matters. But today is all about the beautiful imperfection of the human condition and tsukio desu koto. So, there you have it. See? This is what happens when I finish a bottle of good sake. I suppose this chat has gone on long enough. So, I shall go hug the cat and curl up on the futon. I just washed the sheets this morning, so they smell of sunshine and autumn moonlight. I'm sure to have good dreams. Oyasumi.